What the heck is a sloper? In this video, I'll explain what it is and how you can get your hands on one. I love my sloper and I hope you do too. Now let's dive in. A sloper is a basic shell that fits your body perfectly with just a little bit of ease. There's no seam allowances, and it allows you then to add design elements to it to create any garment that you want, whether you're putting in a collar or you're adding gathers or flare. These sort of things are going to then be your design elements, but a sloper has none of those things. A basic sloper is 5 elements. So you have the front and the back bodice. You have the front and the back skirt. And then you also have a basic sleeve sloper. So you can see these are very simple. They do have darts, so they fit your body very, precisely, but there's no other design elements in it and no seam allowances. As soon as you add seam allowances, the sloper becomes a pattern. That's when you call it a pattern, even if it didn't have any other design elements on it. Once there's the seam allowances, it then becomes a pattern. Now, some people use sloper and block interchangeably. I use both, actually. Sometimes I say sloper, sometimes I say block, and I hope that's not confusing. But I think generally in the US, a lot of people use sloper, and outside the US, a lot of people use the term block. Some people say there's a subtle difference in the meaning, but I have done extensive research and I cannot figure out what the difference would be. And I've gotten contrary information of which one might be more basic than the other one. So I would say I'm going with they're used interchangeably, and I will continue to use them interchangeably as I talk about them in my channel. The reason that a sloper is so important to have is that you can create any garment that you want without searching out a commercial pattern, and it also fits you exactly.
When I create garments from my own sloper, I don't have sewing instructions like I would when I buy a commercial pattern. So I created this order of construction checklist to follow when making any garment. This is the order that works for me, but you can change it to fit your own sewing style. I've included simple tips for each step. Click the link below to grab your free copy.
Now, it did take a few times to get my sloper to fit me perfectly, but these were like very, very minor changes I was making. I still wear the clothes, that I made before I made these minor modifications. It's still, fit me, but I might want to like raise the waistline a little bit or move this seam slightly. Very minor because I just wanted to really fine tune the fit, because once you have your sloper, every single garment that I make, I'm going to use this. And so if there's any imperfections in here, it's going to get carried over into the garment each time you make it. So it does save time in the long run to have your sloper, because then you're not constantly fitting. If you buy a commercial pattern, perhaps if you buy from one brand, you might know that it fits you. So you don't have to make too many alterations. But if you're buying from a variety of brands, each is going to fit you slightly different. So it's this endless time to fit and fit and fit. It's quite frustrating to do that. But with the sloper, I know that whatever garment I make is going to fit me beautifully. So I do think that that is so important. And I just love being able to exercise my creativity to think, what do I want to make, and then drafting the pattern. And the pattern takes a little bit longer perhaps than to just go and buy a pattern, but I enjoy the pattern process. I actually maybe enjoy making the pattern more important than I do actually sewing the garment. So it is really an enjoyable part of my process. So that's why I think having a sloper is so important. Now, there's a variety of ways you can get your hands on a sloper. So probably the easiest way is you can get a fitting shell that's sold by one of the commercial pattern companies. So here, I'm going to show here a picture of one that you could just purchase. And now you're going to have to do some fitting. So you can see this is a very simple dress, has no design other than darts. And that's what my sloper looks like as well if I did a mock-up in a muslin, which is what you will do as you buy this fitted, this they call it a fitting shell. When you purchase it, you'll get in generally the size that you think you need, and then you're going to have to go through and make adjustments to that. Then make adjustments based off maybe you need to add something to the bust or maybe take something away from the hips, whatever it is for your measurements, and then you mock it up in a muslin or whatever very inexpensive fabric that you have and see how it fits you. And then you will make modifications to that and you will still slowly get it to fit you perfectly. Once you finalize that, you will have your own custom sloper. So it might be definitely a little faster than making your own from scratch. Now, for a while, I couldn't find fitted slopers that commercial pattern makers. They had one many years ago and then they stopped making it. So I was like, okay, that's frustrating because I do think it's a really good option to be able to just buy the fitting shell. So one thing that I thought that people could do then if they didn't have that available is just look for a commercial dress pattern that it just has a crew neck, long sleeves, darts. It doesn't really matter where the darts are because you can move darts around quite easily. Just a very straight skirt. That's all you need. No design elements. I mean, if there happened to be a collar, that's fine because you just wouldn't use the collar, right? You could use it in the future. So you can look, I'll post here a commercial, just regular dress pattern that would be great for using as a fitting shell instead. And then you would go through the same process that I just described with a fitting shell. You would have to buy it in a size that was close to what your size is and then make any modifications, do a mock-up in a muslin, and then slowly get that to fit you. Once either one of them, you finalize the fit of that, you want to do what I've done here. You can see I put this in cardstock. I do have a video on how I converted my paper patterns to cardstock, and I'll put a link above here for that video. But this cardstock is much more durable and it will stay. You never want to cut into or make any modifications to your sloper. What I do is when I'm starting to draft a pattern, I will put this down on a piece of white blank paper, trace over it, and then I make my design changes from there. This never ever gets touched in turn besides just tracing over it. And another way to get your hands on a sloper there are companies out there that sell things that are called slopers. So you can buy one there. You're still going to have to do the same thing. It's just like with the fitting shell. But it's just more options. There's more places that you can buy a sloper than just a fitting shell at a commercial pattern company. A lot of times these indie little companies, I think, take more care. So if I was going to buy one, I probably would look for one of these little indie companies that sell slopers and then go through the same process of fitting and making sure it fits you exactly. And then, of course, my favorite is making your own. So I created my own. I think you can create your sloper in a weekend. It seems a bit daunting at first, but it is really not as difficult as I think most people make it out to be. It's just a matter of taking very careful measurements and then following instructions of how you're going to put those measurements onto your flat paper. And then you're going to do the same process of once you come up with your pattern, you're going to have to fit it. It usually takes several fittings to fine tune it here or there. But I do find that there's a variety of instructions out there of how to make your own sloper or block. And I think do not use the ones that have like 3 measurements. It's like ridiculous because you might as well just buy a fitting shell at that point because that's how much customization you have. So I like the ones, and the one that I created my own way of doing my slopers. I do like over 30 measurements to make sure that's how you get a really custom fit in your first muslin or mock-up. And then you just have to fine tune. You don't have to do like vast amounts of changes after that point because it's fitting you exactly. So that's what I would recommend, is looking for a pattern making method that has many, many measurements, and then really take those measurements carefully. Some measurements a little harder to do than others. It's like exactly where are you putting the measuring tape. So what I've done is when I've done a my first like sloper, and then I will see that maybe I didn't measure that in the right place because it's too high or to this, and then I just I write that measurement down. Then I like recalculate what the measurement should have been, so in the future I'll have a more accurate measure for that. And on the back of making sure you have really good measurements, when you are using any of these 4 options that I just mentioned, you have to consider how much ease you like in your garment. Some people like their garments to fit very snugly, so they're going to have less ease, and some want it to be a little more loose, so you might add more ease. So it's definitely something that is a preference to you, and that's what's great when you're making your sloper. You can then have that starting point, always just adding a little bit more ease, or always having a little bit more snug garment, at the very beginning. And then if you really, your sloper does not have a lot of ease in, though. It's just your basic wearing ease. But if you want to make a garment like I'm wearing this blouse that's quite loose, then I'm going to add a lot more ease when I'm in the design phase, when I'm turning it into a pattern. At that point, I add ease in. But your sloper has very minimal ease, but it's still it's a range based on your preference. And these slopers that I'm speaking of are for woven. So this is my woven sloper. It has darts in it, and that's what you would likely want to start. It's a lot easier to get that exact fit in a woven, so you know that that's fitting you and not having to worry about how much stretch is in the fabric that you're using. But once you have your woven sloper, you may want to be making garments out of knit, which I do. I love sewing with knits. And so then I converted my woven sloper into a knit sloper, and I will include the video here of how I did that. Basically, you're just going to be removing all darts from the woven sloper, and because knits do not do well with darts. So, take a look at that video if you're interested in, working with knits. And our bodies change over time. So, if you do lose weight or gain weight, or if you've maybe started working out and you're a little bit more muscular, you may have to redo your sloper, every few years. But that's why, if you remember, I mentioned that as you're doing your fitting and you may have taken one of the measurements was slightly inaccurate, I said I like to make sure I mark it down in my master measurement sheet, because then when you're moving forward, you can remember, and particularly with a note saying exactly how you should be measuring it. If you like, some of the things are sort of difficult to like figure like where should I exactly put the measurement. But if you have those notes, then you'll remember to measure more accurately. And, generally, if you have to like revise your sloper, it's probably not going to be any major revision. It might just be, like slightly here or there that you will want to make some changes. So I encourage you to make your own sloper in any of the 4 methods that I suggested. I think they're all great. It just depends on like how much time you want to put into it, how much precision you want to have. I definitely think having a sloper that's very precise is excellent, but you definitely don't want to get too much into the weeds and constantly making revisions, because at some point you have to say, it fits me just fine. If you want to see how I converted my woven sloper into a knit sloper, check out this video here. And if you had enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.